Dad lifted the champagne glass before anyone finished chewing. That was the part I remember first. Not the applause. Not my brother's smile. Not the white tablecloths or the little votive candles sweating inside cheap glass cups. The champagne glass. Dad's hand around the stem. 2 fingers and a thumb, steady as ever. Like he was signing a check or pointing at a warehouse leak or deciding where someone else is. Life was supposed to go. He did not need the microphone. The room was small, a private room in the back of a steakhouse where the carpet had that old business smell. Like spilled red wine had been scrubbed out of it too many times and finally gave up. 7 of us. Maybe 8 if you counted the framed company logo on the easel near the dessert table, watching like a dead relative. Dad used the microphone anyway. My brother stood to his right. Of course he did. He had one hand resting on the back of the chair at the head table. Casual. Practiced. The way people touch things they think already belong to them. His suit jacket was open, tie loose enough to make him look relaxed, but not sloppy. That was always his trick. Look like he did not need to try. Let other people do the sweating. I was near the back wall with my folder pressed against my ribs. Navy blazer, plain blouse, and simple watch. Nothing loud. Nothing that said I came here to make a scene. I rubbed the inside seam of my blazer cuff with my thumbnail. Just once. That little seam had saved my face more times than therapy ever did. When I wanted to scream, I touched it. When Dad said something sharp in a soft voice, I touched it. When my brother smiled at me like I was a staff member who had wandered into the family photo, I touched it. The seam was smooth from years of me trying not to become what they called me. Difficult, emotional, unpleasant, and not leadership material. Dad tapped the microphone. It squealed a little, and the accountant flinched. One of the senior employees gave that polite half-laugh people give when technology embarrasses someone powerful. Dad smiled. Sorry. Old habits. Everyone laughed harder than the joke deserved. My brother looked at Dad like they had rehearsed the timing. Not the words, maybe, but the shape of the moment. The handoff. The warm little glide into history. There were plates on the table with steak fat cooling into pale streaks, forks laid across napkins, half-drunk iced tea, a supermarket-looking sheet cake, even though the steakhouse probably charged triple for it, because someone in the office had ordered retirement package B and called it done. On the cake, in blue frosting, it said, "Thank you for 38 years." No one had asked me what it should say. Dad looked around the room like a man visiting a house he had already sold. I am not going to make a long speech, he said. That was a lie. My father loved a short speech the way a wolf loves a short fence. He cleared his throat, folded one hand around the microphone, kept the champagne glass lifted in the other. I have been thinking a lot about what it means to leave something behind. My brother dropped his chin. Humble face. God, he was good at that face. I started this company with 2 used machines, 1 rented bay, and a wife who was patient enough not to ask too many questions when payroll got ugly. A soft laugh moved around the table. I stared at the folder in my arms. Inside it was the bylaw copy. Certified, clipped, and marked. The page was already open under the flap because I did not trust my hands to find it later. Article section circled in blue ink. The clause highlighted in yellow so bright it looked almost childish. Unanimous written consent of all voting shareholders. Not majority, not founder's preference, not a retirement toast, and unanimous. I owned a voting share. Dad knew that. My brother knew that. They had both signed the acknowledgment years ago. Their signatures were in the binder, too. Black ink, faded brown at the edges, like even the paper was tired of pretending. Dad kept talking. He talked about sacrifice, about loyalty, about family. He used the word family the way some people use a blanket to cover a stain. I have also learned, he said, that leadership is not just about knowing the numbers. I looked up then. Not because the sentence surprised me, because I knew where it was going. Leadership is not just knowing the numbers meant. I knew the numbers. Leadership is not just contracts meant I knew the contracts. Leadership is not just operations meant I knew operations. Every compliment he gave me had always come with a trapdoor under it. It is about presence, Dad said. It is about instinct. It is about knowing how to carry the name. My brother's fingers tightened slightly on the chair. There it was. The name, not the company, and not the employees. Not the dead we had crawled out from under. Not the ugly little systems I had spent years keeping alive while Dad smiled at customers and my brother played future king at venda dinners. The name. Dad turned toward him. And that is why, as my first act of retirement, I am proud to announce that your brother will be stepping in as CEO. There was a beat before the applause. Tiny. So tiny no one would admit it happened. A little gap where reality checked the sentence and found something wrong. Then people clapped. Because clapping is easier than thinking. The vendor clapped first, slow, polite, uncertain. The senior employees followed. The accountant looked down at his plate before bringing his hands together. My brother smiled wider. Dad lowered the champagne glass like he had just landed a plane. I did not clap. I looked at the cake. Thank you for 38 years. The blue frosting had started to bleed into the white. I had already made the copies. I had already checked the ledger. I had already printed Dad's email refusing to send the succession packet. I had already written the objection in dry, flat language that sounded like it had no blood in it, because blood gives people something to argue with. Paper does not. It just sits there and waits. And that night, standing in that steakhouse room while my father tried to turn me into a footnote with one, toast, I understood something simple. They thought the announcement was the knife. It was not. It was the table. And I had brought the blade. The first time I understood that a company could feel like a house, I was 8 years old and sitting in a cracked leather chair in Dad's office with a vending machine hot chocolate burning my tongue. It came out too thin. Always did. Brown water with a little powdery sweetness at the bottom, and if you did not stir it with the plastic stick long enough, the last sip tasted like wet chalk. I left it anyway, because Dad would hand me the paper cup like it was part of the job. Careful, he would say. Hot. Then he would go back to signing invoices. His desk had a pen tied to it with a little chain. I used to think that was the funniest thing in the world. A pen in jail. A pen nobody trusted. A pen that had probably never done anything worse than sign purchase orders. Dad would let me sit there after school when Mom could not pick me up or when the babysitter canceled. Or when he had a Saturday order he did not trust anyone else to handle. I would put my feet on the metal bar under the guest chair and swing them without letting my heels hit the filing cabinet because he hated unnecessary noise. Outside his office window was the loading dock. Not a pretty view. A dented roll-up door. Concrete stained dark where trucks backed in during rain. A yellow safety bollard with black scuffs around its middle like someone had tried to strangle. It with bumpers. In winter, the dock smelled like wet cardboard and diesel. In summer, hot metal, dust, coffee left too long on a burner. I knew the sounds before I knew the business. The beep of a truck backing up. The slab of a clipboard against someone's thigh. The warehouse phone ringing twice, then stopping because somebody always grabbed it fast. Dad's pen scratching across paper. That was the sound of him then, not his voice. The pen. Scratch, pause, scratch, flip page, scratch. Sometimes he would talk while working. Not really to me, not really to himself. Net 30 means 30 if they are honest. Scratch. Never trust a number that arrives rounded. Scratch. If someone says just a formality, read it twice. I did not understand most of it. I remembered it anyway. Kids do that. They store things before they know what drawer they belong in. He kept a coffee mug on the right side of the desk. White ceramic, chipped at the handle, company logo printed in dark blue. The logo looked sharper then, less faded. I used to turn the mug so the letters faced me when he was not looking. Like that made me part of it. Once, he caught me. "You fixing my branding?" he asked. I froze with my finger still on the mug. He smiled, a real one. Tired, but real. Good. Somebody should. That sentence fed me for years. Stupid, maybe. But some kids get bedtime stories. I got a chipped mug and one sentence that made me believe there was a place for my hands in the thing he was building. Not near it. In it. When I got older, the office changed, but not enough. The old chair stayed too long because Dad hated replacing anything that still technically worked. The window got cleaned twice a year and never, well. The pen chain disappeared when everything moved digital, but I could still hear it in my head whenever paperwork stacked up. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. I learned the company in pieces, not the glamorous pieces. There were not any. I learned which customers paid late, but always paid. Which ones paid fast because they were about to become a problem. I learned that insurance renewals came with language designed to make your eyes slide off the page. I learned that vendors remembered who called them back. I learned that a missed certificate could stall a shipment, and a stalled shipment could turn into a client screaming at 6:10 in the evening while everyone else was already in their car. Dad called it learning the bones. He said it like praise, but not loud praise. Dad's praise came sideways, like a dog that had been hit too many times and did not know if it was allowed to approach. You caught that discrepancy? Yes. 2 hours later, he would leave a stack of new contracts on my desk. That was praise. More work, more trust, more silence. My brother learned the company differently. He learned the handshake part, the golf outing part, the come by the office when the big client visits part. The steak dinner, the charity breakfast, the vendor saying, "Your boy's got presents," while I stood 3 feet away holding the folder with the actual numbers in it. Presents. That word started as a mosquito bite. Small, irritating, and easy to ignore if you did not scratch. Then it swelled. At first, I told myself not to be petty. My brother was not useless. That would be too easy. He could talk to people. He could make a nervous client laugh. He remembered names, or at least he remembered enough pieces of names to fake warmth. He had Dad's height, Dad's jaw, Dad's way of leaning back in a chair like the chair had been waiting for him. He had the shape. I had the machinery. And for a long time, I thought machinery mattered more. I know. That sounds naive. But when you grow up around invoices and forklifts and old carpet and coffee that tastes burned, by 9 in the morning, you start believing the world respects whoever keeps the lights on. It does not. Sometimes the world respects whoever stands closest to the microphone. The first time Dad left me out on purpose, he did it with a seating chart. Not a dramatic betrayal. No shouting. No slammed door. No secret. Plea envelope. A seating chart printed on cream paper and clipped to a clipboard near the conference room. I found it because I was looking for the lunch order receipt. That is how most betrayals enter a room, dressed as errands. We had a vendor lunch that day. Nothing huge, just a small meeting with a long-time account that Dad had been chasing into a bigger annual contract. I had done the prep. I knew the pricing changes. I had flagged the delivery penalty language because the numbers looked friendly. Until you read the timing. I had stayed until almost 10 the night before cleaning the comparison sheet because Dad hated messy columns. People trust clean paper, he used to say. So I made it clean. The conference room smelled like paper plates and mustard before anyone sat down. Someone had ordered sandwiches from the deli down the street, the place that always put too much onion on everything. There were plastic tubs of pasta salad sweating on the side table. Bottled water lined up like little soldiers. Dad's coffee sat untouched near the head of the table. I picked up the clipboard. Dad at the head. Vendor. Beside Dad, my brother to Dad's right, the senior employee near the screen, accountant near the wall, me near the end. Not awful, not openly insulting, just far enough away from the center that I would have to raise my voice to correct anything. Just far enough that if someone took a photo, I would look like support staff. I stared at my name. Actually, that was the problem. It was not my name. It was my role. Operations. No first name, no last name, just operations. Everyone else got a name. Dad walked in while I was still holding the clipboard. "You okay?" he asked. That was Dad's favorite question when he already knew the answer and wanted you to feel unreasonable for having it. I tapped the paper. "Did you make this?" He glanced at it. "Too fast." "No. Probably admin." Admin does not decide where I sit. My brother came in behind him, already laughing at something on his phone. He looked at the clipboard, looked at me, then looked at Dad. "Oh, come on," he said. "It is a lunch, not a coronation." I remember that word. Coronation. People tell on themselves when they joke. Dad sighed. Not angry, worse, tired. Like I was a weather delay? Do not start. I am asking why everyone has a name except me. You are reading too much into paper. That sentence landed harder than it should have, because I had built my whole worth there on paper. Contracts, ledgers, certificates, bylaws, meeting minutes, orders, insurance riders, vendor notes. Paper that proved I had been useful. Paper that proved I belonged. And Dad, the man who taught me to read everything twice, looked me in the face and told me paper did not matter. My brother grabbed a sandwich from the tray before the clients arrived. Turkey, I think. Maybe roast beef. Something with mustard dripping onto the plate. "You want to switch seats?" he asked, mouth half full. "Take mine. I will survive." For half a second, he almost sounded decent. That is the annoying truth. He was not always cruel. Sometimes he was just careless in a way that had been rewarded so long it became a personality. Sometimes he looked at me like he genuinely did not understand why I was hurt. like we were arguing over chair height and not oxygen. Dad shook his head before I could answer. No, leave it. We need the flow right. The flow. There it was again. Not ability. Flow. Shape. Optics. My brother swallowed and lifted both hands like, see, I tried. Then he took Dad's right side at the table. I sat near the end with the spreadsheet I had made. During lunch, Dad said, "Your brother has the temperament clients expect." The vendor nodded before the sentence finished. My brother looked down, smiling at his plate. I watched mustard seep through the bottom slice of bread on my paper plate until it made a yellow stain on the tablecloth. Temperament. That was the day the word became useful to me. Not painful. Useful. Because it told me the plan. They were not going to say I was bad at the job. They could not. Too many people knew better. They were not going to say I did not know the company. That would sound ridiculous to anyone who had ever called after 5 and found me still there. They were going to say I did not feel like leadership. Too sharp, too quiet, too exact, too female, though no one had the guts to put that one in the minutes. Dad kept his voice warm. Clients want confidence. I said, clients want delivery. He looked at me. Not long, just enough. A warning glance, father to daughter, founder to employee. Man with the chair to woman at the end of the table. My brother jumped in with a story about a client dinner, and everyone laughed in relief, because relief is what people feel when a woman stops making the room honest. I lowered my eyes to the spreadsheet. My fingers found the seam inside my blazer cuff under the table. One rub, then I let go, because I had seen enough. After that lunch, things did not explode. They narrowed. That is worse. An explosion gives you debris. Proof. Noise. A story people can understand. Narrowing just makes the hallway smaller every week until one day your shoulders are bleeding. And everyone says, "Why are you so tense?" Dad stopped copying me on certain emails. Not all of them. That would have been obvious. Just enough. Vendor dinners I found out about afterward. Succession language hidden inside strategic planning. A meeting with the accountant moved from the conference room to Dad's office and then described, to me, as nothing you need to worry about. My brother started using future tense ownership. When I am dealing with that account, when I move into Dad's office, when we restructure the leadership team. At first, he corrected himself. You know what I mean. Then he stopped correcting it. That was the tell. The first few times, he still had enough shame to pretend the crown was not on his head. Then he got used to the weight. I would walk past Dad's office and see the two of them inside with the door half closed, not fully closed, because that would acknowledge secrecy. Half closed was cleaner. Half closed said, "This is normal, this is casual, this is not a room you are invited into." Dad would be leaning back in his chair. My brother would be standing near the window. My window, the loading dock window, the one I had watched trucks through when I was 8, the one that still caught gray morning light before the rest of the office woke up. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking out like he had earned the view by being born in the right shape. One afternoon, I knocked on the doorframe. Dad glanced up. "Give us a minute." My brother did not turn around, just lifted one hand in a little wave, still facing the glass. That was when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. They were not deciding whether to make him CEO. They were deciding how to make it look inevitable. People think betrayal announces itself. It does not. It uses your calendar, changes your chair, and stops saying your name in rooms where your work is still on the table. And then one night, it lifts a champagne glass in a private steakhouse room and expects you to clap. The copier jammed 3 days before the party. That is how the truth came out. Not through courage. Not through some dramatic confession. Not because Dad slipped and said the wrong thing while thunder cracked behind him like a bad movie. The copier jammed. It made this wet, grinding sound from the admin corner, like something small was being eaten alive. Then the little screen flashed red and told me to open tray 2. Tray 2 was never the problem. Tray 2 was the machine lying to protect itself. I was printing inserts for the retirement program because, even then, I was still doing the work. That is one of the humiliating parts people do not talk about. You can know you are being pushed out and still be the person making sure the margins line up. Still checking spelling, still finding the right paper, still cleaning up the event where they plan to erase you. The program had Dad's name on the front. 38 years of leadership. A photo from the early days where he was standing outside the first rented bay. Sleeves rolled up, hair darker, smile smaller. The kind of photo that makes people sentimental because it crops out who paid the bills late, and who ate dinner cold, and who learned to read invoices before she learned to drive. Inside, there were little quotes from employees. "Thanks for building something that lasts. Your legacy continues." Legacy. That word had started showing up everywhere. In emails, in toast drafts, on the retirement program, and on the little framed sign near the cake that someone had ordered online. Legacy is what people say when they have already decided who inherits the microphone. I stood over the copier with my hand on the hot plastic panel while it clicked and whined. The hallway outside smelled like toner and stale coffee. Late afternoon light came through the narrow windows in strips, the color of dirty coins. Most people had gone home. A few desk lamps still glowed behind cubicle walls. Somewhere in the warehouse, someone dropped a metal part into a bin, and the sound traveled up through the floor. The copier screen blinked. "Clear, Miss Feed." I opened the side panel. A sheet of cream program paper was folded inside. Accordion-style, gray toner smeared across Dad's face. His printed smile stretched into black streaks. I laughed once, not because it was funny, because the machine had more honesty than my family. I pulled the paper out slowly so it would not tear and found 2 more sheets twisted behind the roller. One came loose in strips. The other ripped straight through the company logo. I needed more letterhead. That was all. More letterhead for the program inserts, because the stack in the admin tray had run low and the new box had not been opened. I went to the records cabinet near the back hall. The old one. 4 drawers, beige metal, dent near the bottom from when someone backed a cart into it years ago, and nobody fixed it. Because the drawer still opened if you kicked it right. I had kicked that drawer 1,000 times. It stuck that day. Of course it did. I braced one foot against the cabinet and pulled. The drawer came out with a screech that made my teeth tighten. Old paper shifted inside. Hanging folders leaned forward like tired bodies on a bus. Vendor contracts, insurance renewals, board packets, archived letterhead. I reached for the letterhead folder and knocked something loose behind it. A binder slid sideways, blue spine, faded label. Corporate records, board and shareholder. My stomach did a small, ugly thing. Not fear, exactly. Recognition, like seeing someone across a room and realizing they have been watching you longer than you knew. I knew that binder. I had seen it before. Years ago, Dad used to keep it in his office, not hidden, just respected. It lived on the second shelf behind his desk next to the old tax binders and the insurance manuals. He would pull it down when signatures were needed. Annual meeting minutes, shareholder acknowledgments, things everyone treated as boring until money or power needed them to be holy. I had not seen it in months, maybe longer. I pulled it out, and dust came with it. Not dramatic dust, not a cloud, just a dry gray smear on my fingertips and the faint smell of old cardboard. The binder was heavier than I expected, the kind of weight paper gets when it has been ignored for years, but still knows it can ruin someone. The cover plastic had gone cloudy. One corner had cracked. The rings inside did not line up perfectly anymore, so when I opened it, the pages caught and tugged at the holes. I set it on top of the cabinet. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the copier fan running behind me, still hot, still offended. First tab, articles. Second tab, bylaws. Third tab, minutes. Fourth tab, shareholder ledger. My fingers stopped at bylaws. I do not know why I turned there first. No, that is a lie. I know exactly why. Because Dad had taught me that if someone says just a formality, read it twice. And for weeks, he had been treating succession like a formality, like the company was a jacket he could take off and drape over my brother's shoulders because he was tired. I turned the page. The bylaws were printed on thick paper, not fancy, but heavier than normal copy stock, the kind that makes a soft sound when you turn it. The top page had Dad's signature at the bottom, his old signature, bigger than it is now, confident in a way that almost hurt to look at. The brother's acknowledgment was behind it. My acknowledgment was behind his. Mine looked painfully careful. I remembered signing it. I remembered sitting in Dad's office, years younger, while he said, "This is standard. It just confirms the ownership structure and voting rights." Standard. Just a formality? I had signed in blue ink because I was trying to look like someone who understood what blue ink meant. I turned page after page until I found the section on executive authority and succession. At first, my eyes moved too fast. Then they slowed. Then the words separated from the page like they were standing up. Appointment of Chief Executive Officer shall require unanimous written consent of all voting shareholders. Unanimous. Written consent. All voting shareholders. I read it again, then again. The hallway did not change. The light still hummed. The copier still breathed hot toner behind me. Somewhere far off, a phone rang twice and stopped. But my body knew before my mind finished catching up. I had a vote. Not a courtesy vote, not a symbolic vote. A legal one. Inside the company documents Dad himself had signed. I turned to the shareholder ledger. There it was. Dad? My brother? Me. Voting shares marked clearly. Dates, percentages, signature blocks, no ambiguity. No little asterisk that said only if Dad feels generous. No footnote that said daughters count unless sons are available. I stood there with the binder open and one hand flat on the page. For a second, I felt 8 years old again, sitting in the cracked leather chair, holding watery hot chocolate, listening to Dad's pen scratch across paper. If someone says just a formality, read it twice. So I did. I read it until the sentence stopped being a discovery and became a weapon. I did not take the binder home. That would have been stupid. I did not hide it. Also stupid. People think revenge is dramatic because movies are written by people who need the audience to stay awake. Real revenge is boring. Real revenge is standing at a copier at 7:13 in the evening making sure every page comes out clean. Real revenge is checking whether the staple cuts off any footer text. Real revenge is putting the original binder back exactly where it was, at the same angle, behind the letterhead folder, because anger feels good for 5 seconds and evidence feels good forever. I copied the bylaws first. Full set. Not just the page I liked. Full set. Because partial documents make people suspicious, and suspicious people get loud. I copied the signature page. The shareholder ledger. The most recent minutes in the binder. Then I copied the acknowledgment pages with all 3 signatures. The copier smelled hot and metallic. One sheet came out with a faint gray line down the side. I threw it away and printed it again. No smears, no torn edges, no excuse. I used paper clips, not staples, because I wanted to be able to separate pages fast if someone asked. I put 1 full copy in my bag, 1 in a plain manila envelope, 1 in my desk drawer under the vendor renewal folder where no one but me ever looked because nobody else loved pain that much. Then I stood by the shred bin holding the ruined program insert with Dad's smeared face on it. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I folded it once and slid it into my folder too. Not as evidence, as a reminder. Some images deserve to travel with you until they have done their job. The next morning, I came in early. Not heroic early, not movie early, and the bad kind. The parking lot still damp, the air smelling like rain and exhaust. My coffee. Too hot because the diner drive-thru girl had not pushed the lid down all the way, and it leaked on my hand. Dad's car was already there. Of course. My brother's was not. Of course. I sat at my desk and opened the corporate drive. There were folders nobody else touched unless forced. Governance, minutes, ownership, annual records. Most of them were maintained because I maintained them, not because anyone cared. Because systems only look automatic to people who never feed them. I searched for CEO succession. Nothing useful. I searched for board consent. Old templates. I searched for unanimous written consent. There it was in a scanned PDF from years ago. Same language, same clause. The digital copy matched the binder. Good. Paper can be called old. Digital can be called incomplete. But matching records are harder to wave away. I printed the PDF. Then I checked the meeting minutes. The most recent official meeting had been months earlier. Nothing about succession. Nothing about appointing my brother. Nothing about a vote. No notice. No written consent. No waiver from me. No board authority recognizing a transfer of executive control. The absence was almost loud. People think proof is always a thing you find. Sometimes proof is the thing that should be there, and is not. No vote, no consent, no waiver, and no authorization. I wrote those 4 phrases on a yellow sticky note and placed it beside my keyboard. Then I opened a blank document. I stared at the empty page long enough for my coffee to go lukewarm. There were so many things I wanted to write. How dare you? I know what you are doing. You taught me this. You made me useful and then punished me for becoming undeniable. I wrote none of that. Emotion gives people a doorway. They step through it and start rearranging the furniture. So I wrote the first line like a machine. To preserve the company record, I am requesting a copy of any current succession packet. proposed CEO, appointment materials, shareholder consent forms, or meeting notices relating to executive transition. I read it back and wondered if it was too much. No. Good and dry. Dry language is beautiful when men expect tears. I sent it to Dad. I copied no one. Not yet. The waiting was worse than sending. Every sound in the office became a message. Every step in the hall. Every phone buzz. Every drawer closing. I worked through it because work had always been my hiding place. Vendor quote, insurance question, late invoice, payroll report. Normal things stacked on top of a very abnormal thing. Dad replied at 2:46 in the afternoon. 3 sentences. There is no formal packet yet. We are only discussing transition language for the retirement event. Please focus on the program materials. Ease focus. I stared at those 2 words, not because they surprised me, because they sounded exactly like him. Soft correction, firm hand, back into your lane. No formal packet yet. That sentence mattered. I printed the email and saved it as PDF. Forwarded it to my personal archive? No. I did not do anything that could look like stealing company documents. I saved it within my work records. Governance file, succession inquiry, dated, boring, and clean. Then I emailed my brother. 1 line. Do you have any materials regarding the CEO transition Dad referenced for the retirement event? He replied 9 minutes later. No words, just a thumbs up emoji. Not even a useful lie. A thumb. I stared at it for a long time. That little yellow hand was so perfect I almost laughed. He thought this was already done. He thought questions were beneath him now. He thought the machinery would carry him because the room had always made room for him. I printed the emoji. It looked absurd on paper. That made it better. I put it behind Dad's email in the folder. The folder started getting thick. Not dramatic, thick. Not courtroom, movie thick, office thick, practical thick. The kind that resists a paper clip and makes you switch to a binder clip. I printed the shareholder ledger. I checked the date. I checked my voting status against the scanned record. I checked whether any transfer paperwork existed. Nothing. I checked whether my share had been reclassified. Nothing. I checked whether Dad had called a meeting and failed to invite me. No meeting minutes. No notice. No agenda. I checked the corporate records the way you check a locked door after hearing glass break. Downstairs. Once. Twice. Again. I did not trust my own relief. That is important. When you find proof that saves you, your first instinct is to hug it. Do not. Proof does not need affection. Proof needs verification. So, I verified. I took the binder copy and compared it line by line against the digital scan. Same clause, same page number, same signature blocks. I compared the shareholder ledger in the binder against the most recent accounting packet. Same voting shares. I compared Dad's email against the absence of meeting records. No formal packet. No consent, no vote, no waiver. The words became a rhythm in my head. No consent, no vote, no waiver. I said them silently while answering normal emails. I said them silently while walking past Dad's office and hearing him laugh with my brother. I said them silently while ordering the final head count for the retirement dinner. Because apparently even a coup needs accurate catering. 2 days before the party, Dad called me into his office. The old office. The loading dock window behind him. My brother was not there. That should have made it easier. It did not. Dad had the retirement program draft on his desk. My draft, the corrected one, fresh print, clean margins, his photo no longer smeared. He tapped the page with one finger. "This looks good. Thanks. You changed the wording on the inside. I fixed a typo. No. Here." He turned the page toward me. "Leadership transition to be discussed during remarks." I looked at the sentence. "Yes." He smiled without showing teeth. "I think we can say announced." My pulse moved once in my throat. Discussed was safe. Announced was his knife. I kept my voice even. "Has anything been formally approved?" His eye sharpened. "Not much. Enough. We are not having this conversation right now." "Okay." The word came out before he expected it. "Okay, not yes, and not sorry." "Not, what do you mean? Just okay." Dad leaned back in his chair. The window behind him showed the loading dock washed in flat afternoon light. A truck beeped as it reversed, slow and steady. I could smell his coffee. Burned, old, familiar. "You have been tense," he said. There it was. Not the question. The diagnosis. I am busy. This is a family event. It is also a company event. His jaw moved a little. For one breath, he looked old. Not weak. Never weak. Just tired in a way that belonged to his bones and not his schedule. His hand rested near the company mug, the white one with the faded blue logo. He turned it slightly with his thumb. "I built this thing so it would survive me," he said. That almost got me. Almost. Because I believed that part. I believed he was scared. I believed he saw retirement not as freedom, but as a cliff. I believed my brother felt safer to him because my brother looked like continuity. Same last name, same shoulders, same easy smile in rooms full of men who liked easy smiles. For half a second, I wanted to help him say the decent thing. I wanted him to look at me and say, "I know you held this place together too." Just that. One sentence. He did not. He said, "Your brother can carry the public side. You know that." Public side. As if I were plumbing. As if I could stay inside the walls, useful and invisible, while he put my brother's face on the front of the building. I nodded once. "I will keep the wording as discussed." He stared at me. I let him. The program stayed the way I wrote it. That night, I wrote the objection. Not at home, at the office. After everyone left. After the warehouse went quiet. After the cleaning crew emptied trash cans, and one of them hummed the same 3 notes over and over near the break room. I opened a blank document and titled it, "Shareholder Objection to Proposed CEO Appointment." My hands were cold. I wrote the date, my name, and my capacity as voting shareholder. I referenced the bylaw section. Not aggressively. Not with adjectives. Just the section number, the language, the requirement for unanimous written consent. I stated that I had received no formal notice of any shareholder vote, had signed no consent, had waived no voting rights, and did not consent to any appointment of my brother as CEO. The sentence sat there. I did not consent. Small sentence, big door. I printed it. The printer took forever to warm up, clicking and sighing like an old animal. When the page finally came out, I held it by the edges and read it standing under the ugly fluorescent light. No poetry, no accusation, and no childhood. Just a line in the record. I signed it in blue ink, not because it mattered much, because it mattered to me. Then I made 2 copies and put the original in a clean envelope. I wrote nothing on the outside, no dramatic label, no red underline. Just a blank manila envelope with the weight of a live wire. I practiced the sentence from the Bylaws out loud once. Then again. Then I stopped because my voice sounded too angry. After 5 minutes, I tried again. No, Dad. You are announcing a preference, not an appointment. The bylaws require my unanimous vote, and I do not consent. It was too fast, so I tried again. No, Dad. You are announcing a preference, not an appointment. That part needed air. The bylaws require my unanimous vote, and I do not consent. The cleaning crew vacuum started down the hall. A long, low roar. I stood alone in the office with the envelope in my hand and set it under the noise until I could say it without shaking. Not because I was not afraid. I was afraid. Afraid of Dad's face after. Afraid of my brother laughing. Afraid of the senior employees looking away because people like their paychecks more than they like justice. Afraid the accountant would mumble something vague and make it sound complicated. Afraid the vendor would decide family drama meant business risk and walk. Afraid, most of all, that I would get to the moment and become 8 years old again. Feet swinging under the guest chair, hot chocolate in both hands. Waiting for Dad to tell me whether I was allowed to belong. That was the real work. Not printing, not copying, and not reading the clause. The real work was teaching my body that I did not need permission from the man who taught me to. Read the paper. I had the paper. That would have to be enough.